I would urge him to open up the government for a short period of time, like 3 weeks, before he pulls the plug, see if we can get a deal. If we can at the end of 3 weeks, all bets are off. See if he can do it by himself through the emergency powers. To my Republican colleagues, stand behind the president if this is his last option.
President Trump responded to that about 2 hours ago, talking about reopening the government. He says the Republicans are standing rock solid. Here he was at the White House.
Well, that was a suggestion that Lindsay made, but I did reject it, yes. I'm not interested. I want to get it solved. I don't want to just delay it. I want to get it solved.
Well, Karl Rove, former Deputy Chief of Staff, President George W. Bush. How you doing, Karl, down there in Austin? Saw you on Fox News Sunday, yes. You were all fired up. You had a big bag of fired up yesterday with Wallace. What do you think happens here? Who comes to the table? How does it get done?
Well, I don't know who comes to the table, but we better have some adults start showing up. I can't believe this. The Democrats will not take yes for immigration reform. 111 Democrats in the House, including Nancy Pelosi, Jim Clyburn, and Hakeem Jeffries, 3 out of the 4 top leaders in the Democrats, last year voted for money for the wall. 80 members of the Senate, including 9 of 11 of the leading Democrats, the Democratic leadership, voted last year for money for a wall, $1.6 billion. Why not come to the table and say, Mr. President, you want $5 billion. We gave you $1.6 billion last year. We'll give you, let's say, $4 billion. That's 1/10 of 1% of the federal budget. But in return, we need to get a solution for the dreamers or the dreamers and the people who are in what's called TPS, temporary protected status. We could resolve some problems and each side could walk away with something. But instead, we got Nancy Pelosi out there saying the wall is immoral, ineffective, and expensive. Well, where was she? Did she say that it was immoral when Barack Obama presided over building 133 miles of wall along the southern border? This is just ridiculous. Adults ought to come to the table and get this done.
Well, she says it's a vanity project. Now you have to question who's vain because they don't want to lose or give in. And as you point out, it's peanuts. You could argue it's pennies compared to what Washington spends. You wrote a piece last week.
10 cents out of $100. 10 cents out of $100.
Wall Street Journal last week, you said illegal crossing in San Diego dropped 92% in 23 years after you constructed the wall, right? That goes back to what President Clinton, I would imagine, right? You said illegal traffic dropped 95% in El Paso, Tucson 90% over 15 years, Yuma 95%. Go ahead, keep going.
Well, look, that's what gets me. Nancy Pelosi was there when Bill Clinton built the wall. Nancy Pelosi was there when George W. Bush built the wall. Nancy Pelosi was there when Barack Obama built the wall. And never did she say that it was immoral, inefficient, and expensive during those 3 presidents, but she does with President Trump. If she really believes that it is immoral, then she has an obligation, a moral obligation, to put forward a bill on the floor of the House to tear down all the existing wall. And she's not going to do that because she knows the wall works in heavy metropolitan and urban areas. It stops people from being able to jump from a neighborhood on the southern side of the border into a neighborhood on the northern side of the border and disappear forever.
Do you have a way out of this, by the way? I mean, you think about how both sides save face, or no?
Well, they only save face by getting something that each side wants. So find a way to get to that point. But I got to tell you, Nancy Pelosi, you know, we hear a lot of criticism of President Trump always just appealing to his base. Well, Nancy Pelosi is refusing to do something that would be good for our country and important immigration reform because she's scared to death of that left wing of her Democratic base. The president made a mistake by having a televised meeting with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer at a point where Nancy had not yet locked in being elected speaker. And so now she is sort of scared to death of upsetting her quote base on the left by cutting a deal with the president. But the country would be better off, and she ought to rise above the petty little necessities of appeasing the hard left of the Democratic Party and instead do something good for the country. Otherwise, Latinos are going to be looking at him saying, wait a minute, we thought you Democrats actually wanted to reform immigration, and you missed a great chance to do so.
Let's see what gives on this. Meanwhile, you saw the 2 reports over the weekend, right? New York Times, Washington Post. Some in the FBI think the president was working for Russia in the West Wing. Others suggest that he ripped up or concealed, or whatever the phrasing is, to make sure that the notes of his meetings with Vladimir Putin would not be made public. You've been in some of these meetings. What do you think of that allegation?
Well, first let's take the FBI counterintelligence investigation. ordered by Andrew McCabe. If we needed any evidence that Andrew McCabe was out of control and out of line, this is it. Remember, the information we now know about this counterintelligence investigation was leaked, itself a violation of the law. But the timing was this. Comey gets fired. Andrew McCabe begins a counterintelligence investigation on President Trump. And within 2 weeks, Bob Mueller is appointed as the investigator. He takes over. He subsumes that FBI investigation. And if there was any evidence whatsoever, do you think that in the last year, if there was any evidence at all that Donald Trump was a Manchurian candidate, that Bob Mueller would have sat on the sidelines and waited until the final report is due? Absolutely
Well, here's
not.
what they're saying is the obstruction was the collusion. That's the argument that we're hearing on behalf of Democrats. And just go ahead and answer that. But answer the question about the notes with Putin as well. I want to understand that.
Look, on the firing Comey as being collusion, look, I think he should have been fired for the way that he mistreated Hillary Clinton. He had no authority to step in and take the right of the Attorney General and make a determination as to whether she should be charged or not. So he was violating the standards and practices of our government. And second of all, he had absolutely no right as the prosecutor, having determined that he had taken that power upon himself, that he was not going to charge her. He had no right to then trash her, which is exactly what he did. So I think he should have been fired at that moment, and the president should have fired him when he came into office. But look, this is an excuse. This is an attempt just to keep it going. As to the notes, look, I wish the president hadn't done it, but on the other hand, plenty of presidents have private conversations that are not revealed to others. And in this instance, there was an interpreter there listening to him. If there's something bad that happened there, the interpreter would have told somebody.
I'm out of time, but I thank you for yours.
Thank you, sir.
Again.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Karl Rove, down
Thanks,
there
Bill.
live in Austin, Texas.